KFAN.
Minnesota is so hot.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Just going for it, huh?
Going for what?
Just going straight in. Like, people, I could be anybody right now. Nobody knows who's talking. I could be some random guy that just came into the studio. So
when I met you in the vestibule, you seemed moderately complicated. So God's cartoon character attempted 3 times to make you smile, and it didn't happen once. So I figured, all right, let's throw the 4th out there. Hey, how you doing?
all right.
Look at that. Reese and Eric Graham's touchdown tile in studio. Look at the smile on that face. See, there it is again. Are you gaining weight?
Not.
Your body fat looks like it's up to 5%.
That's probably like 6.
From
I don't eat as well as runners should.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of like I run so that I can eat guy. I'm not like everything I eat has to be perfect.
Who are you, Sebastian Coe?
No, certainly not. I use running probably as an excuse to eat like a teenager more than I should. And I'm not the kids I coach. I often tell them, guys, you're 17.
Yeah.
You're running all the time. Yes, it's good to eat in a way that gets you ready to run, but you're also 17 and running a lot. Yep. It's okay to like enjoy the fact that you can kind of eat anything you want. It's not going to
at that
come
age.
back to you at all.
Ben Goessling, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. And when I say, are you gaining weight, that's generally not something that A, you would put out on the airwaves, or B, you would say to somebody in a public setting. But I say it to Ben because you forever look like 2 or 3% body fat guy. You coach Apple Valley High School's track and cross country team.
Yep.
And staying thin or staying slender, are those genes with you?
Yeah, somewhat.
Is it really?
Somewhat.
So
but also running a lot.
All right. So what's the worst thing that you will eat or indulge?
I'm a big pizza guy. I am a big burger guy. A lot of the stuff that I probably just shouldn't eat. I have a soft spot for. I like tacos in a lot of forms, but certainly have a soft spot for like bad tacos.
Yeah.
Like Taco Bell has its spot. Shout out Matthew Collar. This is a running debate in the Vikings beat about whether Taco Bell has a purpose. I'm not on
Taco Bell has a purpose.
Well, like there's a value in the $5. I need something to eat late at night. I'm on Team Matthew Collar. Actually, Team Kirk Cousins on this too. He's a big Taco Bell guy, believe it or not. So sorry, Alec Lewis, we're not with you on that. I'm the junky fast food stuff I enjoy probably more than I should.
Well, I mean, it isn't with fast food. I mean, part of the joy and part of what would cause a chain or a certain type of food to ascend with these rankings you're talking about, these metaphorical rankings, is whether you can eat it while you're driving.
Yeah.
So
and I have to eat too many meals while I'm driving. That's probably part of it.
The chili cheese burrito, the Chilito, whatever they call it these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's inexpensive.
Yeah.
B, it's tasty as bleep.
Yeah.
And C, it takes about 45 seconds to eat.
Yeah.
It doesn't go ahead and try to eat a hard shell taco.
Not going to happen
While you're driving.
Yeah, not a good idea.
So, not every piece of fast food was designed to be eaten in fast food fashion.
Yep.
So, but Taco Bell is just a bevy of those,
Yeah. Yeah. There are, it has function and other, taste benefits as well. It's practical and enjoyable.
Right.
So what's not to like?
At Ben Goessling via Twitter. What do you think covering a Super Bowl would be like?
I guess I did it. I did it once, I suppose, in 6 years ago yesterday, as I was reminded after seeing a clip of the Philly special. I'd forgotten that was 6 years ago yesterday. Yes.
Hold on, 3-2. Ben Goessling at Ben Goessling, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Hey, Ben, covering a Super Bowl as a beat writer for the team playing in it.
Yep.
What do you think that'd be like?
I think it would be a lot of fun. I think it would be a lot of work. I mean, because we got awfully close to that. I mean, the closest I've been to it was that year when the Vikings got to the NFC Championship game, and you can see the workload and the interest level go up exponentially every step you get closer to the Super Bowl. It's not a linear progression in my admittedly limited experience with that, but it is something that the closer you get, the more excited people get. And that means, editors want more stuff and, hey, we're doing special sections and all this stuff, which is fun. So there was certainly that feeling of when they got that close of, man, this is going to be a lot of work. But the longer I'm on this beat, this is 12 years for me. Next year would be number 13. The thought of
the less you feel it's possible.
No, I wasn't going to say that.
What the hell?
Where'd
that come from on a happy Tuesday?
That's probably Vikings fans are probably thinking that a little bit.
Yeah.
The fatalistic corner of the fan base.
No, that was the blanket statement, metaphorically speaking, for Minnesota Vikings fans.
But all that is to say, if they get there in my time in the seat as the lead guy for the biggest paper that covers the team, there's something it would be very cool, I think, to be the guy in that spot writing the thing that everybody's going to kind of you write sort of mementos and artifacts for. I mean, part of being the paper of record is that people can look back on this stuff in 30 years. I mean, that's what I thought. That was my first thought when I got back up to the press box after the Minneapolis Miracle. Well, I guess I had two thoughts. The first one was don't screw it up. The second one was like, how cool is this to be sitting here?
Wow.
And you called it. I mean, you that call that you made has been replayed a million times. One of the fun things about this is that you sit there in that kind of a moment and think, okay, I'm writing the game story for the paper of record, and this is going to be something that ends up in people's basements, in bars, in man caves. Like, people are going to get the framed glossy print thing, and just having a front seat to that and being able to help tell the story of those types of moments, I think is a pretty cool part of this job. And if they get to the Super Bowl or win it in my time in that seat, being able to kind of have that experience with the people of this state, I think would be a pretty awesome thing. So that's kind of where I land on it at this point.
And you're a Minnesotan.
Yep.
And you have been a Vikings fan, correct?
Well, yeah. Grow up
it's
kind
okay.
of covering a lot of different things, but yeah.
As a journalist, it's okay to say that you once were a child.
Yep.
You once were a teenager.
Yep.
And you were a Minnesota Vikings fan.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's lots of. I mean, I probably wasn't a super big.
You love the Packers?
One team? No, not so much. But it was a lot of different teams kind of going on at the time, and so it kind of changes things. But I guess wherever you land, you get to the point objectively on this stuff where you have to cover a team fairly, and that's part of the job. But you also, when you live in a place for this long and it's part of your home state, it's you see what it means to people, and it I don't know. I think it hits you differently when you're from a place that you just kind of interact with a lot of people that are fans and go through it and live and die with it every day.
So the centerpieces that hang on the walls.
Yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's the last place for it was a dark, cold, and blustery night at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah.
I always love that.
That's the last place for that lead, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you want to get it right. Yeah. Those are certainly the ones you want to get right. And fortunately, in the case of the Minneapolis Miracle, I think it was not a night game, so you had a little more time, which helps. But it's one of those things that you want to try to sum it up as best you can and give people kind of words to the experience that they went through.
Ben Goessling, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Thanks to Standard Heating and Air Conditioning, nice enough to sponsor Ben's segments each and every week, 9 to noon. We have Super Bowl conversation. We have Minnesota Vikings off-season conversation and much more with the Scribe around the corner. But first,
The Fan, along with the Big Ten basketball tournament, they want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with the National Cash Contest. Go to KFAN.com, enter the keyword cash, and you might win $1,000. The keyword is cash. Enter
is The Fan.
Oh my God! All I can say is, wow. Hashtag faith
Radio.
I just can't believe all the things people say.
And Goessling.
Am I black or white? Am I straight or gay?
HOF.
Controversy. Do I believe God?
So what is the biggest sports event you've ever covered?
Probably that Super Bowl here.
Yep.
Covered a couple World Series, Final Four when it was here. I guess the year after the Super Bowl, right? Yeah, probably those 2 World Series, a Final Four, and a Super Bowl.
The bigger the event, obviously, the more media coverage.
Yep.
So, like when the Final Four was here, the Super Bowl, just the whole thing. There will be a press box. There will be places in the stands that aren't that big, like an ancillary press area.
Yep.
But then there will be a bevy of rooms as ancillary press areas where you're watching the game on TV. Does covering a game off television, if you've even experienced this, does it pull from the nuance of what a writer, a journalist, a beat writer does?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't had to do that in those big events. I think the ones I've covered, I've been in the main press box. The World Series is not quite as bad with that just because it's a bigger commitment to cover when it's 7 games in 2 different cities. So that isn't as much of the auxiliary type setting. I guess the Final Four, I was like sidebar guy number 6. So for the Star Tribune, I wasn't having to write the game story or anything like that. So I was up in the bleeders at US Bank for the beginning of that. And then I think moved down for the championship game, but still was in the building. I do think from a football perspective, I think it's a lot different. A couple of times, I guess my experiences with it would be COVID year where I think there were a couple of games I didn't cover, like the Christmas Day against New Orleans, and then I think the one against Detroit at the end of the season. A couple of preseason games where you skip those and stay home. So I do think it makes a difference. It's easier in the sense that the camera's following the ball and there's all of that kind of stuff. But a lot of what you learn is watching football at a level that helps you learn the game better is to not watch the ball. And the TV does not do a very good job of tracking what else is going on with the corners. I mean, you can't see the safeties half the time on TV, and being able to see what's going on independent of just who's got the ball, who's trying to tackle them at the moment, all of that stuff. There's more going on that is harder to focus on with the way that they shoot things on TV. So I do think being in the building from that perspective, and then just being able to see what's happening on the sidelines, injuries, is somebody reacting in a way that is telling or newsworthy or whatever. I mean, a lot of that stuff is a lot easier to see when you're in the building. So if you're in a spot where you're relying on TV, it does change, I think, your ability to kind of pick up on everything that's going on when you're covering a game as opposed to just watching it as a fan.
In my years calling games for the Vikings, the 2020 season was miserable. It's calling road games from US Bank Stadium off 2 TVs. That part was miserable because I got too used to it.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, we got the TV copy here on this big 70-inch TV, then another big TV next to it with the all 22 live.
So you had that live. Okay.
Yeah, so therefore you could see guys go in motion, safeties come down, stuff like that, which you can't see on TV.
Right.
And but it just this may sound, like great, well, that's the greatest thing in the world, but for me, it made me sad when they would lose because they lost a lot that year.
Yeah, I think we're 7-9, right?
And and here in October or November, the weather, say September, October, early November, whatever, the weather's nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, they just get killed. Well, I know after they get killed what that locker room's like.
Yeah.
What sitting on the bus for 45 minutes waiting for people is like. What sitting on the plane after you get to the tarmac, because we load from the tarmac straight up to the plane, and just what it's like. Well, it's quiet, side conversations to help shape the week of radio and stuff, and I just felt I should be there. I felt like, wow, man, I don't like this job anymore, because I should be there on that bus, on that plane, lamenting and feeling it, with these guys who put everything they have into it to try to win. And here I am cutting my grass at 4:30 listening to Vikings Fan Line.
Yeah.
Where they're sitting on that bus for 45 minutes. I'm like, damn, I'm supposed to. But the home games, they were awful.
Oh, yeah.
What was it?
Just jarring.
And the press box at US Bank Stadium is it's open air.
Yep.
All right. Well, we were asked to close the glass to call, during the broadcast of home games. It's always open. We're going to close it now for multiple reasons because there are no fans in there.
Yeah.
You got a loud cartoon character calling the games, and the last thing Gary Kubiak needs to hear trying to call a play is me yelling. So
because he's right next door.
Right next to the coaches are right next door.
Yep.
So that sucked. Having the glass closed, even though it was fanless. But one game from that whole equation, I just never will forget.
Yeah.
There when I did a podcast with Craig Kilborn, formerly of ESPN, yesterday, and he's talking about some memorable games and stuff like that. And that's what caused me to think of this. I didn't share it with him, but all right, miracle game, 09 Favre, Greg Lewis, the handful of them.
Yeah.
That first game, 2020, when Rodgers came in, and you could hear him.
Yep, the hard counts.
And you could almost hear him giggle when he knew, gotcha.
Yeah.
And now you got new corners. You got Gladney, you got Dantzler. You got all these guys against him. No fan distraction on third down.
Yeah.
I'll just never forget listening to him in the headphones with the parabolic or whatever TV feed we had for Bursich, Lieber, and I, and just how he was almost mocking the situation. It was so easy for him. I'll never forget that.
Well, and there was another thing that sticks out to me from that game. I think Aaron Jones either fumbled at the goal line or was trying to get in. Was his knee down, that kind of thing, and they're reviewing it. And they were showing the replay on the Jumbotron, and it was so quiet in there. You could hear people from the Packers sideline yelling like, oh, come on, you got to be kidding me, or whatever it happened to be, whatever reaction it was, something along those lines. The fact that, the Prince press box at US Bank Stadium is about the 10 or 15-yard line behind the Vikings sideline. So to give people context of where this is. So
Southeast corner, and you're 3 levels up or so. I think it's level 3 of the stadium, top of the second deck, top of the suite level, whatever. So you're able to hear from there all the way across the field to the Packers sideline. It was, that whole season remains kind of surreal to me. But that moment, that first game, because it was just, you're kind of going in, there was no preseason. It's like, what is this going to feel like? Are they going to be able to create noise in any kind of way that is similar? And then the NFL said, no, keep it to like 75 decibels. So it was like, sort of a quiet murmur was all they got. And it didn't really have any effect on opponents because they didn't want it to have that type of environment. And then when you could hear players from the field. Well, I remember the one with JJ that year where his reaction to Kirk not throwing the route that he wanted, that got picked up, and him, dropping a couple bleep-worthy words on TV. Yeah. That became a big thing. And he's like, look, you wouldn't hear this normally. This happens all the time. Right.
But everybody made a big deal out of it because you could actually hear it. So that part was very, very different. And I hope we don't ever do that again. It just was not as much fun without the soundtrack of the fans in the building. But
awful.
It was just surreal, I think, is the word I would continue to use, even thinking back on that 4 years later.
Well, think about this. Another one of the most amazing things from the 2020 pandemic season, we're 6.5 months into Rudy Gobert basically licking his finger, touching Donovan Mitchell's eye, and now every league shuts down. And then obviously Wuhan and everything. All right, so we're quarantined. We've been through all that. Just, you can't touch this, can't do that, can't do this, stuff like that. Grocery store shelves empty. Now you got to, try to time things up to get what you need to get. It just all of those unfortunate memories. Well, 7 months later, or 6 months later, we're going to play the NFL season with no fans. So this is the Tennessee game, third game of the year.
Yep. JJ's breakout.
Still, Justin Jefferson's long catch took place in that game, 71 yards.
The first touchdown.
Right. And on, I think, safety Kenny Vaccaro. One of the more amazing pandemic-related items that I just was, I still am surprised that it wasn't a bigger story than I thought it would be, is that, I mean, this is, like I'm not traveling with the team, so therefore I'm testing in the bio reference trailer less than the A staff, the 1-star staff.
I was in there every day. I wasn't level A. I don't remember the levels, level 2A or 2M. I think it was 2M for media, but I was still testing every day.
Right, but you were out there.
Yeah.
Almost, I wasn't. So therefore I had designated days to do the coach interview and all that kind of stuff. So I'm testing twice a week, Monday and Friday. And so therefore, that was different unto itself, but the testing around the National Football League is what a lot of people talked about.
Yeah.
So the Tennessee Titans roll in, and they play the Vikings, and they beat the Vikings. Khalif Raymond, now with the Lions, gets behind Cam Dantzler for like a 63-yard touchdown, blah, blah, blah. And the day after, the Titans, it was reported, had 8 to 12 players played in the game bit that they had COVID, that they tested positive for COVID and played in the game.
Yeah.
So then I just remember Monday at Twin Cities Orthopedics. Oh, wow, just all hell. We might have 32 players next week. Look at this. Just everything you would hear or see. And not one Vikings player, despite swapping spit, sweat, touching, everything involved, had COVID out of a game. 8 to 12 Titans played with it.
Yeah.
I just thought that was fascinating.
Well, I remember that. I think that became like one of the first sort of data points of how does this thing spread and how likely are players to get it from playing in a game. And I think the NFL looked at that as sort of a chance to just learn and gather information, because it was one of those things that they were trying as hard as they could to not have happen. Well, okay, you knew it was probably going to happen at some point or another, and let's try to use it and learn what we can from it. So I definitely remember that part of that when that happened. Like, okay, it's not a perfect sample because it's one instance. It's not, thousands of them, kind of like we talked about last week with analytics, but it at least was, okay, let's see what we can gather from this about how this thing behaves and how it's going to spread. And I remember that part being, you don't want it to happen, but there was at least a little bit of like, okay, this is the chance to learn and try to get a better handle on this thing. I remember that reaction to it from the Vikings and the NFL.
Describe, courtesy of Standard Heating and Air Conditioning, Ben Goessling at Ben Goessling via social media outlets. Super Bowl, truly, you can, glass half full, half empty, look at it, whichever word, far or close, you want to use. Truly, how far or close are the Vikings from playing in this game?
It's a great question. And I think a lot of it we'll have a better answer to in the next couple of months, because it depends on the quarterback. I think a lot, what's that going to look like? I think, in one sense, I think they're a ways away from it, just looking at the talent they have to rebuild on defense. But if you have an offseason where you get enough of that right, there's still enough skill position talent, especially at whatever point you get Hawkinson healthy. Between Hawkinson, Jefferson, Addison, I think they'll continue to add to the running back room. Whatever the quarterback situation looks like, whether it's Cousins or a rookie, I think they're, if they get a rookie, I think they'll hope that that's somebody that's going to be a high-level player in the not-too-distant future. I don't know that it's next year, and I think there's a lot of work to do for them to get to the point defensively where they're ready to be in that mix. But, we see it so often where it just doesn't take that long in the NFL. It's set up in a way that you can be bad and a couple of years later be in contention. We see that happen all the time, and that's the way the NFL wants it, because it means that 32 fan bases go into a season saying, hey, we at least have a chance. And that's why we continue to tune into this thing as much as we do, and why we stay as invested in it as we are in all of these fan bases, because you're never sitting there saying, wow, they're 10 years away. So I think they have a lot of work to do to get there, but we have seen teams kind of cover that gap in a couple of years. It takes a lot of good drafting, a lot of smart free agent decisions, and
they got to get the QB spot right.
Yeah, that's job number one.
That's the topic,
no doubt.
and that rules all of that.
Yep,
If we're looking for quick turnarounds, that's got to be it.
And speaking of that, sources tell me you put a fair amount of time into Jaden Daniels yesterday.
Yeah.
Either film study, talking to people, reading
film
stuff.
study.
What'd you come across?
Yeah, it was interesting to watch him and try to think about how he would fit in this offense. You certainly see the raw talent. I mean, the guy has a cannon for an arm, and the speed was unbelievable. I mean, some of the breakaway runs you watch, I think he had a couple against Alabama, one against Florida. It's like, my gosh, this guy is, I don't know what he'll time in the 40. I think it's going to be really, really impressive. That said, we hear so much about timing and precision. I mean, Kevin O'Connell uses those words all the time. And there are a number of times where he's at the top of a drop, and whether it's a throw into a window that if you need to throw it with a little bit of anticipation, it's going to be there, or even just, hey, there's a hitch, and if I throw it at the top of the drop, ball comes out, it's going to be a 6-yard, 7-yard completion, and then we're 2nd and 3, and we keep moving. The hesitation on some of those things was like, okay, this is not a deal breaker, but it's certainly something, if he were to be here, knowing how they want to play, they would have to coach him up on that, and he'd have to speed some of those things up, whether it's recognition, whether it's just mechanics. I think, I mean, you're going to probably have that with any rookie. You're going to have some things to learn at this level, but that part of it to me was what stuck out as, okay, if he were to come in here, you're going to have to work on a lot of those things with him.
Do you feel that Kevin O'Connell is game for that? And we just watched a season in which he had to kind of play that tug of war game in the backup spot. It's mid-season. It's not having, multiple months potentially to create something that a rookie like a Jaden Daniels could thrive in. But do you think the head coach is game for the idea of I've had this plan and this plan shows that it can work with the right guy executing it on the field. But with this rookie and this different skill set, I would actually have to adjust from a designed run standpoint or give him options where I'm okay with him using his legs in certain spots with this offense moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see how that goes. He has coached quarterbacks that are more mobile than Kirk Cousins in the past. I mean, we kind of associate the Sean McVay type, Kyle Shanahan type offense with the pocket passer, which is typically what it has been. And I think there are elements of that will be part of their offense. I don't think they're going to go play backyard football anytime soon. I think he has a certain way that he wants to play, and those things are going to be staples of it. That said, I think last year, when they're looking at those quarterbacks that they were looking at in terms of Young, Stroud, and Richardson, all three of those guys to a degree have some mobility. And certainly with Richardson, there was, I think, an understanding, at least if he were to come in here, he does some things differently than what we typically do. And we would have to adjust some of what we do to marry with his skill sets. I mean, you've seen.
Would they be amenable to that?
I think they would be amenable with time.
Yep.
I don't think you're going to see them turn into Lamar Jackson. I don't think you're going to see them turn into, this sort of college-style offense or anything that's going to look completely different than what they do now. But I think building in components and trying to sort out what a Jaden Daniels does well, I don't think you're taking him unless you're saying, well, what got this guy to this point where we draft him wherever we would have to do to get there, we're not going to just ditch it all now. We have to take some of the things that made him attractive to us, made him a Heisman Trophy winner, and build them into our offense. I think, like I said, it's not going to be read option all the time. It's not going to be all these things that just look completely different, but I do think there are ways to build it in. I think some of the RPO stuff that you could do with a guy like that, if you get the timing of it right with the running backs. I mean, they tried it a little bit with Dobbs, and the timing looked off. If you had time to rep all of it, OTAs, minicamp, training camp, etc., I think that's a different question than what can they do with Josh Dobbs in a few days.
Do you, Ben Goessling, at Ben Goessling, StarTribune.com. Do you, how am I going to put this? Is it fair to say, have we seen enough? The 2022 draft for the Minnesota Vikings may have messed up things for years unless players jump up precipitously beginning next year. I mean, we talked about it before you got in.
Yeah.
For years, Nordo and I did after we had Gary Kubiak on. I mean, whether people want to hear it or not, it's how they talk and think in the NFL. Got to give them 25 games. Got to give a quarterback 20, 25 free agent, GM, coach, okay? And that's fair.
Yeah.
Because it's a significant investment. And on the first day of the investment, the stock, the whatever you have purchased, whatever you have attained is not supposed to be as good that day as a year and a half, 2 years later.
Right.
So we're willing to wait through whatever. So now we're 2022, 2023 with Scene, Evans, Ingram, Asamoah, Booth, and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, really, with all due respect, if there are not are because it needs to be multiple
right.
with these players, precipitous improvement and or jumps, that sucker may have set this team back a little bit, like X amount of years.
Well, and especially when they've had cap issues, I think you need those guys to hit because it makes it easier to do your job if you have a contributing player or a starter making $900,000 a year. And when Brian Flores is back, I mean, I think we saw this year the struggles Lewis Scene had climbing up the depth chart, the struggles Brian Asamoah had climbing up the depth chart. I think Andrew Booth at times, Caleb Evans got pulled a couple of times. Maybe those guys will make big jumps this offseason that will change the way they kind of factor into the depth chart. But I did not get the sense that Brian Flores was going to wait around for any of those players to hit
big time,
and it will be on them to.
Caleb got benched 7 times.
He did, yeah. So I think there's not going to be some level of this is my. I mean, he didn't draft these guys. Obviously, Flores wasn't part of it, so I don't think he has any sort of loyalty to that group to the extent that even matters. And he does not strike me as a guy that's like, well, it's year 3. We should be farther along, but let's just give him a little more time. I think no, we got to go now, and I want somebody that can play now. And if you can't do it, I'm going to find somebody else who can. I don't care where they were drafted or who drafted them. We're finding somebody else. So one of the things that you hear about him is that he knows what he wants and he knows what he doesn't want.
Yeah, and he's not afraid.
Correct.
Right.
He's not afraid to tell you. He's not a Midwesterner that's trying to be nice to everybody. He is from New York, and he will tell you what he thinks.
And if you don't like it, you may be coaching in South Carolina. But anyway, go ahead.
Do you think, given that, as we're talking about the 2022 draft class, and then 2023, I'm all in on let's see a little bit of a sample size here before we close the book or end the story on that. But when you start hearing steam about the Vikings are a team that could want to move up in the draft. If you're one of the decision makers watching all of this play, how much faith or trust do you have? Or in some ways, is there danger involved in the idea of saying that 2022 class, that was absolutely just brutal. And now I'm thinking about putting 7 or 8 picks in the hands of a guy that absolutely just whiffed on effectively almost an entire draft class. Now this could be the most important draft of the next 5-10 years if a QB's in the mix.
Love it. Let's end with this because my final question actually what Eric just added ties it together beautifully because the underplayed side of the Vikings offseason is the other side of what he's saying. I mean, he's more talking about decision makers and fan or even organizational level of trust of how things are being executed. But it is the underplayed side is not re-signing Cousins, trading back a bunch of times to amass more picks, and potentially having a rough year with the belief replenishing things would aid the greater good. That's let's re-sign Kirk and run it back. All right, let Flores do his thing, spend some money on free agency, bring this, and draft. All right, seen it a million times. Might work. With Kirk, this team would have won markedly more games.
Sure.
What Nordo just said. Give up A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Get up, give it a try. Do you trust the ones pulling the strings?
Yeah.
The underplayed part of it is, no, we're not bringing Kirk back. No, we're not trading up either. In fact, we're going to keep trading back because we need picks. We need to replenish this thing, and it's going to get ugly before it gets pretty. But when it gets pretty, the goal is it's going to be beautiful.
Right, yeah. And I think it is an interesting scenario because you're not in a spot where the quarterback's going to be super easy to get, like we've talked about. If you're going to get one of the guys that's at the very top of this thing, you're going to have to spend a lot to get up there, and they have a lot of needs in other places. I think that's an organizational level decision, and you'd have to have ownership kind of say, okay, we're on board with where this is going. And Kwesi has kind of pushed back. We've all kind of had this idea of, well, the Wilfs have never wanted to go through the rebuilds. He said, nobody's ever told me that specifically. I think we've seen enough to know that they would prefer to be competitive, and they talk about that a lot. But if there is a decision made to say, we need to stockpile the picks, we need to make a decision about, optimizing things in 25, not 24, especially if we can't get the quarterback that we love this year, I think there's an argument to be made to do that, because at that point, whatever you do at quarterback, whether it's Kirk or a Bridge, in 25, you may be able to say, okay, let's go get somebody else. If we're bad, then we can pick at the top of the draft, and we have all these other picks to kind of bring along with those guys. So whether it's Kirk or a Bridge, by 25, you may be sitting there saying we're that much closer to having our future quarterback in that spot. And if you get all these picks and you hit on them, I think there's a value to that approach, especially if they don't love the quarterback options there. I think they know this is a unique quarterback draft, and that's going to play into some of how they approach this thing, I think.
Yeah.
But
which means if
they don't love it, then that's a viable option.
If you're not re-signing Cousins, and
Right.
then you will draft one, and he will play game one.
Yeah.
Unless Jaron Hall beats him or whatever, and Jaron Hall jumps out of his skin. But he'll play game one.
Yeah.
They're going to be bumps. Let's add one to the 11-17 or tomorrow, the marathon I forgot to write last night.
Yeah.
The underplayed part of it, no, we're not re-signing Cousins. We're going to trade back, get a bunch of picks, replenish this thing. Might be a little ugly for a minute, but then it's going to be beautiful. He's JJ. He's out. He's out. I mean, might as well trade him.
Yeah, that
might
is
as well
the
trade
trick.
him if that's the case.
Yeah.
So that's something about which we can chat later and or next week. You're awesome. Enjoyed the Super Bowl, and I appreciate you.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Ben Goessling, Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Thank you very much. 1044 in the neighborhood.
KFAN, The Fan.
Welcome back. It's News du Nord. And News du Nord is brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park. CanterburyPark.com. Of course, poker, blackjack, table games all year round. Tuesdays. What's today? Today's Tuesday, which means bingo! Bingo at Canterbury Park. Live racing kicking off again in the spring as well. The Casino at Canterbury Park. Go to CanterburyPark.com. I'm going to start here with the NFL, some coaching nugs, if you will. The Washington Commanders. Eric Bieniemy, he was already considered a long shot to return, this via ESPN, with the coaching changes that took place. Of course, Ron Rivera let go. But that move effectively became official when the Washington Commanders hired Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator a couple of days ago. Now, Dan Quinn, new head coach of Washington, he had this to say, this quote, "We won't work together here, but I wanted him to know I really respect the work he's done. I wish him nothing but the best." In Washington, this was something that we chronicled or at least touched on earlier in the season because Eric Bieniemy's name constantly comes up. It's like new coaching cycle. What's up with Bieniemy? What's going on with Bieniemy? Is it all Andy Reid with that offense in Kansas City? Or is Bieniemy getting slighted some way, somehow? Is he too brash? He was a hard personality for some people to work with, even back to his days in Minnesota, etc. We've talked about this at length. And even in this case, earlier this year, we saw some players anonymously noted they chafed, quote unquote, under Bieniemy's leadership. But the key maybe to all of this is they roll with Sam Howell, and the Commanders ranked 25th in scoring and 24th in yards. And so the bad trend of offense in Washington continued. Now, a lot of people are feeling like he's still, all of that said, got a bad deal where he gets promised an opportunity, given an opportunity, I should say, as offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders, while Ron Rivera's in his last season. And so he has the run at Kansas City as the OC that featured a couple of Super Bowl titles. We know that. But Eric Bieniemy has been usurped by Cliff Kingsbury as the new offensive coordinator for Washington under the new head coach, and Eric Bieniemy out of a job again. So getting out from under the nest, under the shadow.
Yeah.
That's not even a weight joke with Andy Reid. Just under the shadow of Andy Reid, he moves on to Washington, and 1 year later he's back on the street. I assume he just goes back to Kansas City. Maybe not. Who knows?
Shoot, I mean,
might as well.
Yeah, they have time to work a deal with Washington to have him for Sunday if they need him just to be there, which is not going to happen.
Want to come hang out, get a field pass?
When you texted me this yesterday and asked the question that you asked, the first thing that I had to recognize or put my mind around is that when a new coach comes in, generally speaking, the coordinators never stay.
Yeah.
So right there, so you can go from there, but then you can go to the ancillary conversations when he reportedly was going for head coaching jobs and couldn't get them. And like Lieber was on the team in 2007 when Bieniemy was the running backs coach for Adrian. He and we and others have shared stories about Eric, and just his nature and the way he coaches. Nothing, we're not talking off the field away from the facility else or anything, just him as a man and the way he coaches, and it's not for everybody, specifically in 2024. So after you sent it to me, I thought it out a little bit, and I'm like, one is Quinn wants his own guys, and that happens all the time. 1A is what a tumultuous run for Bieniemy trying to elevate his career, and whether it's head coach or coordinator with those rings with Kansas City. So it's I think his run would be defined as that of mercurial, in that not enigmatic, but it's just been mercurial because it's had so many highs and lows.
It has indeed. One other smaller coaching note with Vikings ties, Durante Jones, DB's coach, did interview for the defensive coordinator job with the New York Giants. There was some tumult in New York as Wink Martindale, all those blitzing as part of Daboll's Coach of the Year award in 2022. Wink Martindale and what he was doing with that defense in New York, and Dexter Lawrence is all over everybody. Apparently, Daboll and Wink Martindale might just hate each other, and so he was let go.
Yeah.
And Durante Jones, an opportunity to elevate his career, but Shane Bowen has been named via sources. He was the Titans D coordinator for a few years.
Okay.
He's expected to become the Giants' new DC.
Shane Bowen?
Shane Bowen, I believe.
So wait, I thought
name.
the Giants just hired another guy from the Titans to work on the offense, like something Dixon or something. Is Daboll in his final year so they can bring in Vrabel? Because you just mentioned the Tennessee bit, and I know there was another Tennessee name who got hired by the New York Giants very recently.
I'd have to look into that.
That was not the same name that you shared. So they, so what they're doing is they're picking that staff. Here it is.
So they can bring Vrabel.
Giants, Schefter from a half hour ago. Giants hired former Titans offensive coordinator Tim Kelly as their tight ends coach. So now you mentioned the Bowen bit, and now you got the Kelly bit.
What?
Where's Vrabel? Vrabel's I retweeted something Nacho Lieber put out there about Mike Vrabel and a Diana Rossini report from The Athletic that Vrabel, she heard at the Combine, Vrabel supposedly is not getting serious consideration for head coaching jobs because he's just so big and imposing that there are those within personnel who are it'd be very difficult to combat his opinion because he's so intimidating.
Really?
He's so big. Now, there's got to be more context to the story, but just what was put out there, I'm like, holy cow. That's about one of the more shallow things I've ever seen.
We had Todd Downing on maybe a couple of years ago at the Combine.
Yeah, he'll be on from the not from the Combine. Chet, and he's
with the Jets now, right?
Yeah, I'm going to the Combine. The Jets, most of their staff is not. Most of the Dolphins staff is not sure. So a lot of staffs are doing a lot of it virtually.
Yeah.
Eden Prairie's Todd Downing will be on Combine Radio, just not from Indy, but anyway.
Well, no, it's just from your conversation with Todd a couple of years ago, and not that he would have opened a vein like this during an interview that we would air on the radio in the first place. I never would have guessed that he would have had that. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Vrabel. So outside of, again, just the physically imposing nature of him being passionate about the game, it certainly wasn't a problem for the Titans until they just couldn't get it done. Poaching assistants from the staff that had awful issues in certain spots offensively and defensively. That's interesting. But, hey, Giants know what they know.
Diana Rossini asked about Mike Vrabel on the Athletic Football Show. Quote, I don't think there was a fit for him. I don't think he sat in front of any owner who thought that his style was going to work for what they were looking for. I had a GM at the Senior Bowl who mentioned to me Vrabel's physical build. that he's a very large human being and can be very intimidating to people in an organization that are going to be part of these decisions. And that is a factor.
Okay.
If you are a general manager of a National Football League team,
He's 6'4", 260.
and the size of somebody intimidates you in a way that decision making now all of a sudden is like a factor that you need to chat about, well, then the owner of that team needs to figure out who that GM is and needs to fire him right now.
Well, who's the guy that had to go to Vrabel, look him eye to eye or eye to chest and say,
Yeah.
we're trading A.J. Brown?
Oh,
What
wow.
was that like?
Oh, John Robinson, and he's not tall. John, wow, he went up. He probably got up to the navel. We're trading AJ. What?
To stand on an orange crate.
Jeez.
That sounds awful. We're out of time. News to Nord brought to you by the Casino at Canterbury
That's
Park.
good. I'm glad you're out of time. You know why? More for the 11:17.
See, I knew we'd have some stuff on the cutting room floor. We're all set.
And the marathon segment of Canterbury Park, CanterburyPark.com. Bingo, B-I-N-G-O. We got bingo tonight. Bingo tonight at Canterbury. Learn more on the website, CanterburyPark.com. Learn more about what it's like to win a Super Bowl with Super Bowl Stories. The final installment today features Michael Lombardi, who won 3 Super Bowls as an executive with the New England Patriots. He also was with Al Davis in the Oakland Raiders, Bill Walsh in the San Francisco 49ers. Michael Lombardi is an elite football mind. He also has opinions on the Super Bowl. That's around the corner on KFAN.